yes, the distance learning didn't work well for many of the students because there wasn't that reciprocation. Yes, as a student, if I'm watching TV and you're a teacher on the screen trying to teach, I would have something that I want you to, maybe expound on, but I can't. I can't tell you. Yes, so those were some of the issues. There wasn't that quick reciprocation like in a classroom, yes. You mentioned something, and as a student, I'm quick to ask you, teacher, I do not understand part A or part B. But the teaching on the screens, it was very hard for the students. They couldn't get that quick, response from the teachers. But then I'm joined by Patrick Kaboyo. He's going to be telling us how the learners and the teachers are prepared for this and all that of the reopening of the schools. Many thanks for joining us on Morning at NTV.
Most welcome, Romeo. Good morning and good morning, viewers.
We had this short, brief conversation on Saturday. It was only 6 minutes. But
Yes.
now I think we have like half an hour. Talk to us about how learners and students should be prepared for the reopening of the schools. What should be done?
Thank you, Romeo, and thank you, stakeholders, whoever is watching me, for the opportunity to share. I would like to say that as stakeholders in the education sector, we are certain, we are optimistic, and we are sure that he who closed the schools will be opening them soon. But that said, we have seen lots of leaks that have come to the public purporting to communicate the dates. Even the parents who have been calling me, directors, are schools opening 21st or 20th. What's the date? So the clarion call is that we should be mentally ready. So when you ask, are people ready? First of all, our mental faculties should be focused to ensuring that at time A, soon, schools should open. Why? Because you cannot lock students forever.
Indeed.
You cannot lock schools forever. And also COVID is not here to go, let's say, in December or April next year. It's likely to stay until those who are experts in science get how to wipe it out. But as we learn to live along with it, of course, you know that you cannot test the depth of the river with 2 feet.
Indeed.
You first try 1 foot, and trying with 1 foot means that when we reopen schools, we shall be able to know and use that as a baseline on how processes are being taken to inform the total opening. But also, the public should be aware that when we say reopening schools, it's not that all candidates should be able to report to school on the same day. So the ministry here and working with us should focus on establishing the right number of candidates. And from my interaction with those that have information, we are having around 1.2 million candidates. So we can say on day one, each school should call about 20 or 30.
So it shouldn't be
following
instantaneous.
the alphabetical order as it is done in the class registers.
In a phased manner.
A boom, in a phased manner. So that as long as we are reopening, let's stagger the reopening in 1 week. And when we reopen, how do we manage workers, for instance, who are managing these students? But also, there is a tough component of managing parents. Some parents are not as disciplined as the students.
So what should the parents be doing at this stage?
The parents should know that if you are at a school, you have to follow instructions as your son or daughter. If you are to be checked, then you should abide and be checked.
Yes.
And this is a clarion call again that if there are parents in schools that are medical doctors, this is the time to join hands. You shouldn't come as a doctor to deliver your child to the school and you remain in your car seated and the madam is taking the chair. So why don't you come with your gown and participate in the returning of these children? Because we know there are very many doctors and also those doctors who own schools as directors. This should be the time to come out. As a federation, we are designing a model to work with the medics and concentrating on the psychosocial support. That is quite a challenge in most of our schools because it's not about the infrastructure that you have the classrooms, you have the latrines, you have the toilets, you have the kitchen, but these children should come with a mind that is ready to receive new construction because they have been home watching a lot of stuff that some is pornographic, that content has not been regulated by teachers. These children will be coming with a disoriented mind, so that deconstruction for their psychological readiness to start school needs to be dealt with professionals. And here we shall need those parents, including teachers, that have the capacity to deconstruct, but also create an enculturation move that they can move from this culture of home to the school culture.
So in a way, the pandemic has brainwashed our children while they were at home. The information they were getting on the screens, on the internet, it kind of brainwashed the students. So the first thing that teachers ought to be doing is deconstruct the students.
So much that even the teachers themselves are also deconstructed.
Wow.
So the reconstruction, therefore, has to be a conversation at the Ministry of Education and Sports, also bringing in the Ministry of Gender and the professionals that are within the school. This is not going to be, you know, we are the teachers of the school, we are the directors, we are the parents, and now we have received the children. No, we have to work together protractedly for a whole week to ensure that the readiness is there. And when we talk about our children, parents, and everybody ready, it's not about the financial only. It's about the software issues of these learners, the psychological readiness, but also the financials in terms of how people are going to buy the requirements to respond to the standard operating procedures. And also when we talk about standards, it's also another discussion, because this standard thing is coming to us as a new thing.
Before we even get into the standard conversation, Mr. Kaboyo, this COVID-19 pandemic more or less looks like a war situation. It's kind of like it takes us to 1981, 1985, the post-conflict between President Museveni and the UNLA soldiers. After the war, you saw many young child soldiers who were being told, go back to school. But then the first part was to deconstruct those young people, to veer away from that mentality of, fighting into a new model, which is the pen is mightier than a gun. And then in 2020, fast forward, we are back in that same situation. Students have been brainwashed. Now we have to deconstruct the same students. Wow. How prepared are the schools to go ahead with this?
Thank you for that experience. First and foremost, as you have elaborated, I would like to say thank you to HE, the president, that brought our children back. And now that he brought them back, this COVID can best be understood if you have had a person that has contracted it in your family.
Indeed.
But those that are still hearing it, that's why you hear them say it's a political thing, it's not there. But once it strikes, that's when you know. So in terms of how to relate with this situation, is to ensure that parents understand and also students get to know that the biology they learn in the classroom, the science they learn relates to these issues of coronavirus, corona disease, the history. Now we have internet that we can use for those that are able, but we also have written material. So in terms of how people are going to relate it and maybe to deconstruct what is happening is to ensure that we integrate learning and family. Because the first school is not the classroom where you take your child to study. The first school is the home. So there should be instances that give these children ample time and responsibility to relate. For instance, when you're at home, you wake up, you must wash your face. You must brush your teeth, you must bathe your body, you must do the hygiene tenets. Meaning that when you go to school and a teacher says, you've gone for short call, have you washed your hands?
Indeed.
You have gone out, have you masked? Those practices are going to be part of our culture. But also, we believe that greatly when these children return to school and begin wearing masks appropriately, that first term flu-like disorder. You know, when children return to school, mostly the young ones, the first week every parent is at a pharmacy buying cough mixtures, buying this. But with the masks, we know that the contact and saliva and the spitting will be reduced, hence containing the virus. But also we know that if there is proper hygiene, proper use of water and soap, slowly by slowly, week 1, week 2, week 3, we shall be able to contain with clear records of capturing people's temperature and managing where cases could be arriving.
Mr. Kaboye, what about the standard operating procedures? Let's talk about ADERAs. Can the learners and the students cope?
And as I said, yes, if students have come from home, first of all, students must ask themselves, why have we been at home from March to September without going to school? They should be able to answer that question. If they answer that question, is 7 or 8 months a long time? Yes. What are we supposed to do so that we do not go back home? Then we are supposed to wear masks. We are supposed to wash our hands. We are supposed to distance ourselves. We are supposed to follow instructions. And I listened to some youngsters who are saying, I miss my peers when I go to school. This time they have to salute, this time they have to wave, this time they have to change. So because of that, the SOPs at the learner level can be followed because it will be part of instruction. But this should also be the time for school leaders and school directors to review the school rules and regulations that have been written and have never been reviewed, let's say, for 10 or 20 years. Can you customize them to addressing the current trend? Because even in law, they say if a law is designed and does not address the issues of the time, is as good as no law. So school regulations, communication from the schools to parents, and also communication from the ministry to us all should offer hope. And by this week, we expect hope that you never know. The person who closed may come up with a tentative date to give us so that we get ready, so that it's not a boom that we are going to open and you find everybody is scattered or scampering to open. But I also want to say that financially, we shall need a discussion with those that are concerned to ensure that that issue is looked into critically, because everything is going to require a financial attention, and we cannot do that without an honest discussion.
Indeed.
It's not so much, but it should be something as a startup.
And of course, Mr. Kaboye, speaking of finances and reopening of schools, not all students are going back.
No,
that is a fact.
candidates.
Because of, yes, even the candidates, not all of them are going back because of the many situations we've seen within this COVID-19 pandemic. Poverty, number one.
True.
Many of the parents ate the school fees. Many of the parents, many young girls, yes, who were also in candidate classes, got pregnant during this COVID-19 pandemic. And all sorts of things have been happening. What advice do you have for such parents and government moving forward?
You see, when COVID started, people asked for food. Government gave food, but never gave everybody. Like at my home, I never saw the food. But I have not stopped eating. Even the neighbors who never got food, but they have kept looking for what to eat by working, by striving. Meaning that even when we have our students in school, there is no school that is going to ask, can you pay up front? I think the culture of school payments is also going to change because everybody has been hit. And through dialogue, so as you ask which recommendation, I think it should be protracted dialogue and continuous engagement between parents, school leaders, and administrators to ensure that no one is stressed. But also in terms of schools, let's say in the rural areas, I know for sure now that there are schools that closed because it was abrupt, and they kept luggage for boys and girls in those dormitories. They have never gone to pick them. But we know that it has been an agricultural season that some parents have food already. So there are schools up country that parents could be there without hard cash, but they have produce or they have what to offer as food, then those schools should be able to receive food from such parents and convert it into fees, into money. So meaning that nobody is going to cry so much. There should be thinking outside the box and also to work so hard to see that all sectors are supporting each other. Because when schools are open, agriculture will boom, food will be bought because students will be eating it. When schools open, the social service sector, you'll find that stationery is being bought, airtime is being bought. We shall be able to move slowly, ensuring that the economy opens again. Yes.
Of course, as we talk about the parents being poor, we are also cognizant of the fact that even as we talk about reopening of schools, the schools themselves, some of those schools won't be reopening because of the financial complications they've been able to encounter during the COVID-19 pandemic. What will be the fate of such schools, Mr. Kaboyo? Because you need money to institute the measures needed by the World Health Organization and the Ministry of Health to ward off the contraction and the spread of COVID-19. You need money to offer food to these students, to even offer a space of accommodation. How will all this be put into play if these schools have run out of money?
Thank you, Romeo, and viewers and parents who are listening to me. As a Federation of Non-State Education Institutions, we have not been sleeping.
Indeed.
When this issue came about, there was a committee on COVID bringing different players of private schools as leaders, and we had several meetings with the Ministry of Education. We collected information about the schools regarding loan stress, wage, those are teacher salaries, and also other costs. And those forms, some were sent to me personally, some were sent to colleagues who are working with. But when we collected that, our focus was to ensure that government comes in to help. And you know how government works, it a bit procrastinates. But because of how we have been working, we have been able to identify a partner. The Federation has identified a partner to whom we are in conversation, and this conversation is to make us offer a small startup, very small, I want to be quoted rightly, very small. It could be to help you buy disinfectant, it could be to help you buy temperature guns. Not all of you per se, but those that responded and we have information with us about your school, we shall be able to do that, to support them to reopen. And if the number increases, our team shall be able to do a verification, because we have a committee of 9 people that drafted this idea, and this idea will be brought back to us to see how we actualize it before schools open. So that is a hope I'm offering, because it is there. We have submitted it. Even the recipient knows that he has it from us. It is not a story. Even colleagues that sat with us in several meetings to draft it are aware about this, except for those that are hearing it for the first time. But also this communication brings hope and also brings the ministry to know that there are partners who are working to ensure that schools open. Indeed,
Mr. Kaboye, because these schools need to be helped big time. Not even the schools, even the teachers. The building that collapsed in Makindi, Lukuli, the first person to be rescued was a school teacher. And when he was asked what he was doing at the site, he said he had to, figure out ways of circumventing the COVID-19 restrictions and the poverty and so forth to make a living. So he ended up at a construction site. So I'm looking at this teacher. Yes, going back into a school setting. You get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying.
The psychosocial state of this teacher. How can these teachers be helped moving forward? And also, Mr. Kaboyo, we are reopening schools. But then 2 weeks ago, borrowing from the example of France, they reopened their schools 2 weeks ago, but a week later, they were shutting down 22 schools because of skyrocketing cases of COVID-19. Do you have such a situation where in Uganda we might suffer the same fate, and what needs to be done to avert the same future?
I don't see Romeo and listeners and parents listening
First with the teachers?
With the teachers? First of all, as a professional teacher, there are things or occupations that you should not venture into by mere fact that you are a trained teacher. For instance, I should not find you on the road roasting kasoli. I should find you designing instructional and learning materials that you are ready to sell when schools open.
Yet the former is what has been happening.
I should find you baking. I should find you making bricks. I should find you making pavers. I shouldn't find you doing prostitution. I shouldn't find you fighting. I shouldn't find you doing things that do not match with the professional ethos of a teacher. Meaning that the department in charge of teachers at the Ministry of Education and Sports should sieve out from COVID to now what are those issues that have come about and will require a curriculum remodeling or maybe refresher training. These teachers should undergo a retooling phase that is going to bring them back.
Don't you think that should have been the first step before reopening of schools?
Of course, teachers can undergo that through a shorter process. But I also want to tell you that I'm fully aware that the National Curriculum Development Center a week ago was retooling teachers on the lower secondary school curriculum. And from the monitoring reports I have read is that a number of COVID issues came about, and those trainers who are managing them were able to deliver that message. Teachers who are trained and are watching this show know that those COVID issues were talked about and they were addressed, meaning that the retooling has already begun. So TIET and NCDC should have a joint partnership to ensure that as those trainings go on, COVID messaging is put on the agenda. Back to if cases shoot as it is in France.
Yes.
You realize that Uganda is not France.
And then
yes.
When I was giving the assessment,
Yes.
I also realized that France had many measures put in place to ensure that they stopped the spread of the same. But then, even with those measures in existence, there were also so many cases. So if you come back to Uganda with our meager resources and so forth, don't you think it will be worse?
You see, the first resource is the human resource.
Indeed.
And the other important resource is time. How do you manage the reopening in phases? By bringing fewer numbers, as I said.
Right.
And by using the resources that is professional. These doctors will not be there to see children contract COVID when they can offer professional advice.
Indeed.
As a federation, we are going to reach out to them to have a partnership to ensure that at least for every school, we have all doctors, medics, and intern doctors trying to come up, because this is war, as you said. But also, if we manage our entry and exit, take proper records, eat well, manage the hygiene, and know that we have a problem, the case will be managed. We are here together. I bet you will call me back. First week, second week, third week in this country, once schools open, we shall be safe and there will be no cases.
So what would happen in the event that a school identifies a COVID-19 case? What should they do?
Ideally, when such a case happens, there should be no panic. Schools should be able to work with professionals. If they cannot, let them liaise with the health centers that are close. Those that are advising the president, and if they are listening to this show, should make sure that there is a comprehensive and elaborate communication strategy that is different, not from the usual. What is it that these students need to know before they learn? Shall we have every lesson beginning with a COVID message? A COVID message bit on the chalkboards or the softboards or audio to bring that readiness that we're in this situation, not by our own, but because of condition. If the communication permeates to the parents, permeates to the learners and the community, then learners should be able to know that if I value myself, I should value my life. So with components like that coming into the day-to-day learning and teaching process in schools, this will be curbed. So there shouldn't be worry
Yeah.
There should be hope, there should be optimism, there should be efforts geared towards telling people what they should do, but not to keep them in suspense. Then they begin speculating. And of course, we know that when it comes to the use of sanitizers, it should be properly used in schools so that learning takes place.
All right, Mr. Kaboyo, what about the situation of overcrowded schools? Yes, where now students are required to socially distance. Can the schools even afford new infrastructure?
That's where now we have a problem. For government schools, the government has to come in. For private schools, we know for sure that a good number of them have the infrastructure, but also the students are too many. Then there could be cases of non-compliance or complacency, that you do something in the afternoon because you expect inspectors, and at night maybe you congest these children. So we shall call for inspections that the child or the student should be the first reporter in this case, because this is not a simple matter. Maybe government and us should work on an inspection model to ensure that these students are not congested where they are sleeping.
Yes.
And if we get to know that the congestion is not there, week 1, week 2, they are at school okay, we shall be able to plan for a better return of all students. But this is a bit tricky in terms of how it will be managed, but it is not the most primary thing. The most primary thing is to return.
Mr. Kaboyo, reality check. Can
Yes.
we envisage a situation where students go back to school, no high fives, operating behind face masks, and so forth? Do you just envisage a situation where this is possible?
You see, communities are very interesting.
But you do understand
yes, I listen
the,
to some
the psychological
parents.
setup of our community, the students, how they are, the social connection of the students.
The psychological setup is brought up by those who instruct.
Indeed.
At home, it's the parent who instructs. If you have a son or daughter, this child will tell you that our teacher told us this is what should be done. If these students return to school, they will be able to tell their parents what they have been instructed to do. But also, you must know that parents who are on TV saying, if schools reopen, I'm not ready to take my children back. And these are the same parents, when schools reopen, week 1, no case, week 2, no case, they will come running to return the children. So should also schools say, because we open schools and you refuse to bring back your children, so teach them in your home? Not at all.
Indeed.
So we should be able to listen to each other, to have a dialogue, to continue interacting, that these children can salute, can have a high five, can follow instructions, will not do to the contrary, because they know it is instructive. Yes.
All right, Mr. Kaboyo. Patrick, as we wrap up, I'll just give you a minute or two to give us, all our viewers, final recommendations moving forward for the learners, for the teachers, and for the schools. This is your camera.
Remio, thank you so much, and viewers. One is that an elaborate and comprehensive communication strategy should be put in place for all and timely. Two is that for all directors in the rural, even in the uptown scale areas, should be able to comply to the operating standard procedures, because we are not going to have schools closed forever. The third one is on the parent, student, and stakeholder relations, that let's be accommodative, let's be listeners, and get to receive these students not as mere children, but our clients who make our businesses run. So we have to handle them differently and not the way how we have been working with them. And the other one is that we shouldn't look at a financial resource envelope only through cash or through the pockets. If parents have services that they can offer to the school to have these children back, be it in terms of provision of scholastic materials or provision of cereals or seed or food, let that be, because everybody is hard up. And the very final one is that much as we don't expect a lot from government in terms of financial assistance, but that resource from the National Social Security Fund to all savers will be enough to plow into the economy, that parents will be able to save, that parents will be able to have purchasing power, and that can only come if it is given. It's not begging, it's not, people are asking for their own hard and saved money. It may leave the 20%, it may come to 10%, but that is what is going to be the equalizer, that every parent who has that money will be able to pay school fees.
The General Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions, Mr. Patrick Kaboyo, many thanks for having made the time to speak to NTV.
Thank you so much for inviting me and the opportunity, and the viewers for listening.
Indeed. And you who is watching, thank you for staying with us from 6:30 a.m. up to now. Mr. Vincent Biendaimira, the Director of Physical Planning at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, is on standby to join us on state after this break to talk about the collapsing buildings in Uganda. Get this, in 2020 alone, 4 buildings have gone down. January, April, May, and September. We'll be right back with that conversation and a lot more.